Former Finance Minister, now Old Mutual Chair Trevor Manuel, is being quoted as saying that more than R1 trillion has been withdrawn from our economy in the last 10 years. He says this is because investors are not certain of our regulatory environment. He also says government has not promptly implemented plans and government needs to put in place clear regulations and long-term regulatory certainty to attract investors. Isaah Mhlanga is the RMB Head of Research and Chief Economist there. Isaah, good afternoon to you. Do you agree with Trevor Manuel? Is government the reason so much money has left our economy?
Good evening, Stephen, and your listeners and viewers. Look, in broadly we agree, but I think there are other aspects that matter a lot more for global investors, particularly those that invest in emerging markets. The most important thing that investors look at first is the potential to get a better return in an economy. And if you are looking at equity investors, they tend to look at your economic growth because that is a proxy of, how your equity investments are likely to return. If you have low growth, it implies that equity markets are likely to underperform countries that have high growth. As a result, investors tend to look at high or fast-growing economies. If you look at South Africa's economic growth over the last 10 years relative to the average emerging markets, they have been growing at about 3.7%. We have been growing at less than 2%. So obviously, from a return perspective, it implies that we would not be favored. Other emerging markets will be favored. And then you can then overlay the regulatory issues in the sense that is it easy to take money in and take money out. Global capital wants to be mobile. They don't want to be captured within a particular economy. So that also matters. But I would say one of the most important aspects is your economic growth, and we have not implemented all the reforms that have been required to actually lift economic growth to make our economy attractive from a return perspective.
Even if we implemented all of the reforms, it would take quite a long time before we actually saw the economy growing strongly, right? It would basically mean that all of Transnet's ports were working and the lights were always on all the time.
Yeah, from where we are going forward, yes. But if you look in the context of the capital outflows over the last 10 years, 10 years is long enough to implement reforms that should generate economic growth. We just didn't do it well enough. Take energy, for instance. The South African Reserve Bank says it has subtracted 2 percentage points off GDP. We could have had economic growth of more than 2% over the last decade had we solved our load shedding issues in time. Also, if you look in terms of the issues with our infrastructure, our ports, our rail, even our water systems, those things could have been solved over a 10-year period, but we just didn't, because we have been cutting capital spending budgets, because we have not been able to cut current spending in the fiscus. And as a result, we defunded investment into the critical sectors of the economy. It could have been done. At least where we are now, there is, at least from what we see, there is a concerted effort to say we need the private sector to come and help in critical sectors of the economy where, the state, through its SOEs, have been dominating. That is in the same sectors that I mentioned: energy, logistics, water sector. The private sector is starting to participate. It might take some time, hopefully not 10 years.
Isn't in a way, we can argue about what should have happened and what should be done, but isn't this all about politics? As a country, we're often divided about what we want. Sometimes the governing party, I'm afraid to say, is divided about what it's wanted over the last 10 years. And that leads to this kind of level of uncertainty, and that affects economic policy, and it affects investment from other countries.
I'm not so much convinced that it's a lot of differences in terms of what society wants, whether it's private sector or it's government. I'm sure both sides want a thriving economy that can reduce unemployment rate, where entrepreneurs can start businesses and thrive, and in the process employ a lot of people. I don't think there would be a dispute. There would be someone from either side that will come and say they don't want that. The differences are how to do it. Where from the side of government for a very long time, we have seen a posturing that says the state must control critical sectors of the economy. While the private sector is saying, look, the if it can be done profitably, government's role is to provide an enabling environment, and the private sector should come and play a bigger role. That's where the difference has been. There seems to be a convergence now, to say where the private sector can play a role in a profitable manner, they should be given the space to, and the government must provide an enabling environment. And we saw it with energy, regulatory changes in 2022. The private sector invested a minimum of 15 billion rand over the last 18 months in the renewable energy space. That is a convergence. But ultimately, all of these things must lead to higher economic growth, job creation, which I think all sectors of society want.
So, I mean, all sectors of society want that. I think we're divided on how to get there. Some people want the state to lead it. Some people want the private sector to lead it. And some people just want to protect unions, or they want to protect their turf. And, I mean, that's what happens in economies everywhere. And, of course, we're also still, it would seem, quite a highly concentrated economy.
Yeah, look, absolutely. We have seen that historically. And hopefully we can see less of that going forward, because ultimately when the economy is not performing, it hurts all different role players. If the capital outflows or if foreign investors aren't investing and confident in our own economy, that limits the ability of the economy to grow and even grow the union base for those labor unions, because people that are unemployed don't contribute to anything to the unions. So we would have to see, that convergence among role players in society in terms of what we need this country to be and what is the best way that we can rally behind and make sure that we succeed as a country.
Isaah Mhlanga, thank you. Head of Research, Chief Economist at RMB. Do appreciate the time.